All right, hockey fans, how are we doing? So, uh, I've been thinking, and that's never a safe thing. It's always a dangerous thing when you get to thinking. What I've been looking at is I've been thinking, all right, this season's almost over. We got the cup going on here, but for most of the teams, we're already starting to wonder and think about next year. How can we get better? How can we improve? What's going to happen next year? So I wanted to look at the Eastern Conference because, especially in the Eastern Conference, the disparity between the playoff teams and the non-playoff teams was astronomical this season. There was no drama. All right, we knew early on which 8 teams were getting in. It was just a matter of seeding towards the end there, but there was nobody close, nothing. And the statistics even bore it out. It was like the top 8 teams, the plus minuses were so much different than the rest of the teams. It was absurd. So, we've started to see some coaching changes and everything like that. And I saw an article that somebody tagged me to on Twitter, written from, I think it's Montreal Hockey Now, and kind of got a kick out of their premise because what they were saying was that the coaching search in Florida, if there's going to be one, what happens with the coach in Florida is going to affect Montreal. And how's that going to affect Montreal? Well, their theory is that the first round pick that we gave them for Sherratt in the following year's draft, they somehow got the idea that because it's not a protected pick, that somehow if we screwed up our coaching situation and something didn't go right, that pick might be a lot better. And kind of alluded to the possibility of how, we might not even make the playoffs, basically, if we don't do the right thing at coach. And I got a good kick out of that because I don't know about you Panther fans, but I think you could hire three people from Twitter and get that team to the playoffs. You get swept, probably, but okay, a caterpillar and a dead cat could get 100 points out of that roster. No coach. You could have no coaches at all, and that team would make the playoffs. And there's a few teams in the Eastern Conference that are the same way. The talent disparity between the top 8 and the rest, for the most part, and that's what I want to talk about here, for the most part, it's a done deal. It started off last season. We saw it. It wasn't close. So I got to thinking, okay, who might be out and who could possibly draw in, which led me to look at the standings one last time. Panthers with 122 points, the Leafs with 115, the Lightning with 110, the Bruins with 107. Over here in the Metro, the Hurricanes with 116, the Rangers with 110, the Penguins with 103, the Capitals with 100. The closest team to the next wild card spot were the Islanders, 16 points away with 84 points. So it wasn't close. So started to look around and think, okay, who's in, who's out? Who's in, who's out? Now I came up, and I'm sure that there's inevitably going to be one fan from every fan base that somehow disagrees with some of this. But I've got 5 that as close to guaranteed as you can get. Okay? I've got 5 that are as close to guaranteed as you can get. In no particular order, not trying to piss anybody off. Tampa Bay, Florida, Toronto, the Canes, and the Rangers. Those 5 teams, barring something impossibly, unintendedly catastrophic happening, those teams are making the playoffs. You've got the other 3 teams. You've got Boston, Pittsburgh, and the Capitals. Okay, so I'm looking at the Capitals and I'm looking at the Penguins. And though I'm not putting them in the same category as the other five, saying as guaranteed, most likely those teams are making it. Okay. I'm looking at some of my notes here. Now, the Penguins, they've got $23 million in cap. They've got 9 forwards signed. Of course, they have decisions to be made on Letang, Malkin, and the only goalie they have is Jari. So, but again, 23 million. So if they don't screw it up, they've still got a good core. They've still got good players. Do you think they're going to let both guys go? If they let both guys go and they start going towards a retool, rebuild type of thing, you might look at them as a team that could slip. But as we're going to get looking at this, some of these teams could slip and still make the playoffs because what's behind them may not have enough juice to overcome them. So that's Pittsburgh. Now, Washington, where's my Washington notes? The Capitals, they've got $9 million in cap. They have no goalies, like as in none. So, okay, you can make a couple goalies out of $9 million, right? This is doable unless you're the Panthers and you spend 10 on one. Now, the Capitals' issue is age. They've got 12 forwards signed. 8 of them are 30 years and older. Okay. Now, the defense, everybody they have signed on defense except for one guy is 30 years or older. So you start to wonder, now, how many years can those guys play at a high level? Could they slip? Sure, it's possible, but by how much? They could have slipped by 10 points. I mean, what were those numbers again? The Capitals got 100 points. The closest team were the Islanders with 84. So the Capitals could slip by 10 points and still comfortably make the playoffs. You see what I'm saying? Then you get the Bruins. And my buddy Raven is going to be upset about this. But to me, the Bruins are really the only team in the East with a realistic possibility of not making the playoffs. Now, obviously, the fact that they fired their coach is reason number one. We don't know what's going on there, but we know whatever's going on there, it don't look good for the situation that they're in. They only got $2.5 million in cap. They fired their coach, and they only have 5 forwards signed for the 23-24 season. They've got an aging roster. You don't know what's happening with Bergeron. And the reason why they're in cap hell, in my opinion anyway, they've spent a whopping $32 million on defense for 8 players. The money they've spent on defensive players, they spent 32. To give you an example, the Penguins have 19 spent. The Capitals, 17.5. Even Tampa Bay only has 24 million spent, and Carolina has 20 million spent on defense. The Bruins have $32 million going to the defense. It's not optimal. So the question is, could the Bruins slip far enough? And if they did, who's going to come behind them? And that's the second part of the thing. Now, the Bruins, they weren't even, they were the first wild card, okay, with 107 points. So you just look at the standings from last season. The Bruins could have slipped by 20 points. They could have had 87 points instead of 107 and still would have made the playoffs. Okay? The rest of these teams are just not good. So let's make a case. All right? We're going to play pretend here. Let's say one of these teams slips. Most likely it would be the Bruins. It could possibly be Pittsburgh or Washington. Depends on what those teams decide to do. And the same goes for the Bruins. Those 3 teams have aging rosters. They have free agent decisions that they need to make. And the goaltending Boston seems okay, right? The Capitals have no goalie signed, and I'm going to double check that because I'm saying it off of memory and what I wrote down. But before I get to this, that's the Islanders. We're going to talk about them too. But let me go back here to the Washington Capitals. Washington Capitals have, they have no goalies signed. They have Samsonov and Vanacek, but they're both RFAs. They have no goalies under contract for this upcoming season, as in none. Now, what do they have? They have about $9 million in cap. So you can make that work. You could just sign both of those guys. So the point being is that those three teams, more than any of them, Washington, Pittsburgh, Boston, have decisions that they need to make based on an aging roster and cap space. And are they going to go for one more run, or are they going to start retooling, rebuilding, whatever word you want to use? So let's just say one of those three teams decides, I think we've done all we can with these aging players, and we're gonna rebuild. We're gonna retool. So who could come behind them? This is a tougher question. Now, when I looked at this, and I looked at the details of basically everybody with the exception of the Canadians. I even for you Ottawa fans, well, no, I didn't look at the Canadians. I didn't look at the Devils. I didn't look at the Flyers because I didn't think those were realistic options at all. I looked at everybody else, and I came up with two teams that arguably, if one of the other teams really slipped and one of these two teams took a jump, I got two. The first one is Buffalo. Now, why Buffalo? I've written this down, but I'm going to go look at this. So we'll just do it together here. First thing that jumps off the page is Buffalo has $35.5 million of cap space. All right. And they have a lot of their roster signed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They've got, 12, 13 forwards signed. So they've got their roster signed for the most part. They need defensive help, no doubt. They've only got $10 million on 4 defensive players marked so far for this season. The problem they have, obviously, is at goaltender. They have no goalies signed for this upcoming season. So Buffalo is one of those teams that, if they made the right moves in free agency, got themselves the right goalie or goalies. Sabres had 75 points last year. It's still a stretch. Because let's say they became 20 points better and got to 75. Excuse me. If they got 20 points better and got to 95, the Capitals would have to fall off by 6 points. The Penguins by 10, the Bruins by about 15. Those are possible numbers. Those are possible, but remember, I just bumped up the Sabres by 20 points. Unlikely, yeah. It could happen depending on what they do with all that cap space, and that's why I included them. Now, some of you might be thinking, the Red Wings. The Wings, again, I'm going to look at the Wings. The Wings are one of those teams that only have 3 forwards signed for the following season. So why did I not think the Red Wings could be one of those teams? They again, $35 million in cap space. Okay. Now the Red Wings, you look at, they've got a lot of their guys signed. They do have, but next year they have 3 forwards under contract for the 23-24 season. So that $35 million, they're going to have to spend somehow. And the biggest thing with the Red Wings, again, is, what are you doing at goalie? You got Nedeljkovic signed for this upcoming season and nobody else. Grice is a UFA. Hellberg is a UFA. So again, you've got cap space, but you got goalie issues, and you've got issues in terms of long-term with the number of guys that you have signed. And that leads me to the team that I think, if anybody is going to take a jump, and you guys are going to laugh at me, so let me take my water first before you get laughed at. Looking at the standings from last season, I see the forgotten team. I see the New York Islanders. Now, we can all say that they played like crap, and maybe they did. And we can say that they fired Trotz, and that was stupid. And maybe it was. But when I look at the roster, when I look at the New York Islanders roster, I see $12 million in cap space. I see a list of guys that certainly reminds me of the Panthers getting beat the crap out of by the Islanders, and the Islanders going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Barzal, Anders Lee, Nelson Brock, Josh Bailey, Peugeot, Palmieri, Beauviller, Cizikas, Clutterbuck, Matt Martin, Ross Johnston. Hell, they even still have Parise signed. Now, defensively, they're a little shorthanded. They're definitely shorthanded defensively. They got 3 guys signed for this season. Goaltender. They've got their guys signed. Varlamov, Sorokin are signed for this upcoming season. What do they got? They got $12 million in cap space. That's feasible. That's workable. So, what are they going to do a coach? What are they going to do a coach? Could Cassidy be a possibility there? I can't believe they fired Trotz. Yeah, they didn't have a good season, but we all know how that went in terms of how it started off with the, what was that? How many? Was it 12, 15, however many road games in a row they started off the season? And they still were the 9th seed. You see what I'm saying? They were still the 9th seed. And that's a good roster. Sometimes good rosters can have a bad year. Now, can they make a comeback of sorts and replace one of these teams in the East? Let's look at it. I mean, we know the top 5. Can we agree, even if you agree that I should put more teams in this, can we agree Tampa Bay, Florida, Toronto, Canes, and Rangers, barring something absurd and just ridiculous, those guys are making the playoffs? Okay, can we at least agree there, even if you think your team should be included there? Can we agree that those 5 are solid? So you got 3 spots left. Boston Penguins and Capitals were the guys from last season. Any one of those 3 teams could decide we're going to rebuild. We're going to retool. I don't think Washington's going to do that. I think Washington looks at how they played against the Panthers in the first round, and they probably feel like they've got some juice left. Pittsburgh, we're going to know, all right? Malkin and Letang. If they let those guys walk, you know Pittsburgh's in for retooling / rebuilding, and they may slide off. And the Bruins, what are they doing at coach? Are they bringing in, they fired Cassidy with the reason that I've heard, because he needed to be better with the younger players. That sounds like a youth movement to me. You didn't extend Bergeron. This doesn't sound good for Bruins fans. They could be one of the teams that falls off. That said, like I've said, the difference between the Bruins and the Islanders was still 23 points. That's a lot. The Bruins could be 10 points worse. The Islanders could be 10 points better, and the Bruins would still make the playoffs over the Islanders. So, what are the odds? What are the odds that we come back here next season and it's the same 8 teams? 80%, 90% odds that it's going to be the same 8 teams. And if it's not the same 8 teams, it's liable to be 7 of the same 8 by almost 95%. Because then you'd have to have 2 of those 3 teams fall off and 2 other teams come up and take it. I don't see it. And I don't like it, to be honest with you. Now, why do I not like it? I mean, I'm happy. My team's in the pretty much guaranteed category, right? I don't think this is what the league had in mind when they wanted parity. It really even shouldn't have worked this way. When you design things looking for parity, there should be, slots 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, at least. Those slots should be a lot more difficult to determine who's going to have them and who's not. Like in football. Geez, by the time we get to there's 2 games left, there's like 7 teams that could take the last 2 spots, and it all depends on who wins who and it's crazy, but it's good. It makes it exciting for the fans of those teams. It's good for the sport. It's good for ratings. Everybody can sit there with 2 weeks left and say, well, it's still possible. I mean, the Dolphins were 1-7? And at some point we were like, if we win, we're in. It's crazy. But hockey, at least in the Eastern Conference, we'll do the Western Conference at some point here or later on in the week or next week. But at least in the Eastern Conference, the disparity between the top 8 and the rest of the teams is so big. And it's unexplainable from the sense that there's a salary cap. So, now some of these teams you see $35, $34, $35 million in cap space. That doesn't happen by accident, right? You've been going through a rebuild and a retool and all that. But when you have 35 in cap space, you might be having some owners that are trying to save some money. That does happen. So I don't necessarily like the fact that we're likely to get there's at least 6 of the same 8. Of those 3 that I said were not guarantees, 2 are not going to fall off. I really don't think. It's almost like the top 5 are guaranteed. The Capitals are almost guaranteed. And then Pittsburgh and Boston are kind of like, what are you guys doing? That's kind of how I really see it. So you got maybe those 2 teams that could fall off, and they'd have to fall off pretty significant. And we don't know what Boston's going to do. To me, Boston is the wild card. Because they're decent at goalie. They've kind of got, especially with Swayman coming up, they've got their goalie situation, but the team is just getting older. The team is very, aging. So I'm sure that they don't know I'm sure that they have a plan, and I'm sure we don't know what that plan is. But they're really the wild card. And then you look at the 2 teams, really, the only 2 teams realistically, again, that have a shot, in my opinion, of making that jump. I think the Islanders, because they were good, and it was just last year that they were bad. And then if I had to pick one of the younger teams that's up and coming, I'd pick Buffalo, because I'm looking at their cap space, the roster, and the fact, and where they're positioned. It's a stretch. Don't get me wrong. It's a stretch to say they could do it. But I'm just trying to make it happen, because otherwise we're going to have the same 8 teams, and liable to get the same results with Tampa going and winning their 4th cup next year. That's a different subject. So, all right, I've gone on long enough. I'm curious to your opinions. Now, I know and look, no disrespect to any of these other teams. I'm sure there's going to be some people that think maybe the Red Wings or the Senators could be that team to pull it off. Look, Sabres had 75, Red Wings had 74, Senators had 73. So that's viable. All right. Now, I'm not saying it could never happen. I think it's a stretch to think any of those 3 teams could do it. So I'm just going with the Sabres right now in the stretch. Over in the Metro, you've got the Islanders, and then kind of forget about it. I mean, you can really forget about the Devils and the Flyers. I mean, I looked at the Jackets. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing a team that can make a jump like that. And that's the biggest thing. In years past, you had, like when the Panthers had 96 points and just barely missed, there was a lot of teams competing there towards the end of the season, where with this, it was just cut and dry and over so early. And it takes a lot of the excitement out of the later games. It really does, because you want more games that have playoff implications. And it also makes the disparity look more than it is, because as it really actually gives a false impression of a lot of things towards the end of the season. Because, like, look at how Tampa played. They knew they were in. They ain't worried about the division, whatever. And they had that little slump where people thought they were actually, kind of losing on purpose to get to the Panthers and have it be a 1 seed, 8 seed thing. And then you've got teams that maybe had they been in a playoff race, like maybe a Buffalo, if they had actually in the last 20 games, been able to say, hey, we're only, like the Panthers used to be, hey, we're only 4 points out, we're only 5 points out. They would have played at probably a higher level and shown more and grown more and given that fan base more hope. Where, here, by Valentine's Day, it's done. I mean, it was really done by Thanksgiving. But even by Valentine's Day, there wasn't really anybody in the Eastern Conference that could be like, well, we're only 5-6 points out. It was just done. And I don't like it. I don't think there's anything you could do to solve it. And I think what I said about the older teams, Boston, Washington, Pittsburgh, these are older teams that have held on for a long time, and congratulations to them. But I think that's what's happened in the East is those teams have kind of stayed around longer, and the younger teams can't quite get their stuff together enough to take over the older teams. And so we're just getting the same teams. And somehow the Islanders, I mean, on one hand, I think, how could you fire Trotz? And then I look at that roster and I'm like, how does that roster miss the playoffs? But it happens. It happens. So, all right. Curious about your opinions. Don't anybody kill me. I know there's going to be one guy that's going to say I'm an idiot if I think Buffalo can make it. There's going to be somebody that says I'm an idiot for not saying the Red Wings. Raven's going to be upset that I brought up the Bruins again. I'm sorry, buddy. I wish I could ignore it, but I can't. But that's okay. That's what these videos are for. I give you my opinion. Some of you like it, some of you don't. And if you need to take your aggressions out on me in the comments, like the Colorado Avalanche fan who apparently deleted his comments in Stu and I's preview video, that's okay. I can take it. I was married for 24 years. You don't scare me. You can't say anything to me that's going to actually get me upset. Are you kidding? All right. Make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Tomorrow, we start 1 hour before the game with the live streams. Okay? And we're going to have live once the finals are over. Don't worry. How many am I going to promise? I'm about ready to ruin my summer here. All right. So I want to promise 3 live streams a week, but that would be a lie. So I'm going to promise 2. During the off season, I'm going to promise 2 live streams a week. And then we'll see how it goes if I can do more. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So I promise 2. I don't know what the subject will be. We'll figure that out as we go. Somebody had a good idea in the stream the other day about an idea for doing a Florida Panthers stream. Well, who should stay and who should go? We'll do that soon. Once we know who the coach is. Jeez, already. So, all right. Appreciate all the support. And I will see you guys. I'll have another video out, I'm sure, tomorrow. And then 1 hour before the game with the live stream.